His father ordered his son to punish the new slave, but what he did changed everything. The whip was in Thomas Whitmore's hands when his father uttered the words that would change his life forever. 20 lashes, Thomas. This wild black woman needs to learn her place on this farm. It was the sweltering summer of 1858 in Georgia. Colonel Edmund Whitmore pointed to the newly arrived young slave girl tied to the punishment stocks in the center of the yard. Her name was Abeni, a word that in her native tongue meant the one we asked to come. But she hadn't been asked for. She had been snatched away, captured, sold. Thomas gripped the whip with trembling hands. At 23, he was different from the other Southern gentlemen. His mother, before she died, had fervently taught him the scriptures, planting in him a faith that now tormented him. "Love one another as I have loved you," echoed in his mind as he gazed at the young woman's bare back. Abeni wasn't crying. Her eyes, deep brown like the red earth of Georgia, gazed at the horizon with a dignity Thomas had never seen. She was different from the other enslaved people on the Whitmore plantation. There was something in her spirit that wouldn't bend, a flame that the brutality of the journey on the slave ships hadn't been able to extinguish. "I'm waiting, boy!" Edmund's voice thundered. "Or have you become too soft to keep order on my property?" The other enslaved people watched in forced silence. Among them, old Mama Ruth murmured prayers in a low voice, her lips moving in supplications that only God could hear. She had known Thomas since he was a baby, had nursed him when his mother fell ill, and she knew that this moment would break the heart of the boy who had become a man. Thomas took a step forward. The sun beat down on the back of his neck. Beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. He raised his arm and stopped. "Dad, I can't do this." The silence that followed was more terrifying than any thunder. Edmund Whitmore charged forward like an enraged bull, his face flushing red, the veins bulging in his neck. "What did you say, kid?" "I told you I can't, sir." Thomas dropped the whip to the ground, a gesture that sealed his fate. "It is written, 'Do not do to others what you would not want them to do to you.'" "I can't. I won't do it." Edmund's hand flew, striking Thomas squarely in the face. The young man staggered but did not fall. When he looked up, there was blood trickling from his split lip and something even more dangerous: conviction. "So, you disobey your father. You disobey the master of this land." Edmund spat the words. "Very well. If you don't have the stomach to maintain order, then you'll sleep with the blacks for a week. I want to see if that doesn't break your soft heart." Thomas accepted the punishment with his head held high. As he was dragged away by the overseers, his eyes met Abeni's for the first time, and in that moment, something impossible happened. She inclined her head slightly, not in submission, but in recognition. A warrior recognizing another. That night, thrown into the damp slave quarters that smelled of suffering and stolen dreams, Thomas heard the songs. They were melodies of lament that transformed into hymns of hope. And among all the voices, one stood out. Abeni sang in his native tongue, words he didn't understand, but which touched something deep in his soul. Mother Ruth approached in the darkness, her calloused hand gently touching Thomas's shoulder. "You made a dangerous choice today, son, but it was the right choice. The Lord sees what men do not see." "Mother Ruth, what will happen to her?" "With Abeni?" The old woman sighed. "Her father had her brought from an auction in Charleston. They say she led a mutiny on the ship. She killed a sailor with her own chains before being subdued. Her father wants to break her, make an example of her." Thomas closed his eyes, praying silently. He didn't know it yet, but that night was only the beginning. The beginning of an impossible love that would defy everything he knew. The beginning of a journey that would test his faith to its limits. And the beginning of an explosive truth that would destroy his father's empire and free dozens of souls. On the other side of the slave quarters, Abeni also couldn't sleep. She thought about the white man who had chosen to suffer in her place. In her land, among her people, she had been promised to a warrior, but the white men's war had destroyed everything. Now, in a foreign land, chained and branded, she had witnessed something rare: true courage. And no matter how hard she fought against it, something in her heart began to awaken. The 7 days in the slave quarters transformed Thomas Whitmore forever. On the first morning, he awoke to the sound of the bell summoning the enslaved people to work before dawn. His muscles ached from the hard floor, but it was a different kind of pain, the pain of truly being alive, perhaps for the first time. While the others prepared in silence, Thomas noticed Abeni in a corner, braiding her hair with quick, precise movements. "You're not afraid, are you?" The question escaped his lips before he could stop it. Abeni stared at him with those intense eyes. "Fear?" Her voice was hoarse, her accent heavy. "I already died when they tore me from my land. What's here?" She touched her chest. "Is just a shadow walking. Shadows have no fear. Everyone is afraid of something," Thomas insisted, moving closer. "Are you afraid?" she retorted, a defiant spark in her eyes. "You, who dropped the whip, who chose to sleep here instead of hurting me?" Before Thomas could answer, the overseer Silas Crow, a cruel man who loved his job, burst into the slave quarters, banging his stick against the wood. "Get moving, you bums, and you, Thomas Whitmore, will learn what it means to work like they do. Grab that sack and go to the cotton field. I want to see those delicate hands bleeding before noon." Thomas worked under the scorching sun, his back burning, his hands blistered and then tearing. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was witnessing it, seeing old Joshua whipped because his tired legs could no longer keep up the pace, seeing little Sarah, only 8 years old, carrying sacks bigger than herself, seeing Abeni work with a silent fury as if each handful of cotton was an act of resistance. At noon, when they received their meager ration of water and stale bread, Thomas sat down beside Mama Ruth, his hands trembling with exhaustion. "How do you endure this? Day after day, year after year?" Mother Ruth looked at him with eyes that had seen generations born and die in chains. "Faith, son, the faith that the Lord did not abandon us in Egypt, and he will not abandon us here. And the stories. We keep ourselves alive with our stories." "Tell me one," Thomas asked, genuinely interested. It was then that Abeni approached, sitting close enough to hear, far enough away to keep her distance. Mama Ruth began to tell the story of an African princess who had been captured and brought to America, but who had never forgotten who she was. She taught her son to read the stars, to find his way back home even when the currents weighed heavily. And when she died, they say her spirit flew back across the ocean, finally free. "My grandmother used to tell similar stories," Abeni spoke for the first time since the morning, her voice low but full of emotion. "She said that our ancestors watch over us, that no matter how far they take us, we carry our land within us." Thomas watched her speak, fascinated by the strength emanating from her. You know how to read?" Abeni laughed, a bitter sound. "In my homeland, I was a merchant's daughter. I spoke 3 languages, knew the paths of the stars and the secrets of healing herbs. Here, I'm just property, less than cattle." "Not to me," Thomas said before thinking. "To me, you are a person, a soul created in the image of God, like all of us." The silence that followed was heavy. Abeni studied him with renewed intensity, as if trying to discover if he was real or just another cruel illusion. That night, after everyone was asleep, Thomas was awakened by low voices. Sneaking to the door of the slave quarters, he saw Abeni talking to 3 men: Samuel, a strong slave who worked in the forge, Isaiah, who looked after the horses, and Moses, the eldest, who served in the main house. "We can't trust him," Isaiah said. "He's a Whitmore. Slave owner blood runs in his veins." But he took my punishment, Abeni argued. He risked his father's wrath. It could be a trick, Moses warned, to find out our plans. Thomas felt his heart race. Plans? What plans? He has a soft heart, Abeni continued. I saw it in his eyes. He truly believes in the words of his Bible. Maybe we can use that. Or perhaps he'll use us, Samuel retorted. I've seen white men feign kindness before tightening our chains even further. The conversation was interrupted by a dog barking in the distance. The four quickly separated, merging into the shadows. Thomas returned to his corner, his heart in turmoil. What were they planning? An escape? A rebellion? And more importantly, what would he do with that information? In the following days, Thomas observed more closely. He noticed the glances exchanged, the messages passed through coded songs, the way certain people disappeared for minutes during the night. There was a resistance network there, operating right under his father's nose. On the fifth day, he made a choice from which there was no turning back. He approached Abeni as she was fetching water from the well, away from the watchful eyes of the overseers. I know you're planning something, he whispered. Abeni froze, his muscles tensing like those of a jaguar about to pounce. I don't know what you're talking about. I want to help. She turned slowly, disbelief etched on her face. Why? Why would a slave owner help slaves? Because this is wrong. All of this. And because... He hesitated, then spoke the truth that was growing in his heart. Because when I look at you, I don't see a slave. I see a woman of extraordinary courage. I see someone who makes me question everything I've been taught. I see... Careful, Abeni interrupted, but his voice was softer now. Words like those could kill us both. So be it. But before I die, I want to do something right. Something that matters. Abeni studied her face for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Meet me at Mama Ruth's cabin after the full moon rises. Come alone. And Thomas, she touched his arm briefly, a touch that sent electricity through him. If this is betrayal, I swear by the blood of my ancestors that you will not live to regret it. That night, under the full moon and the silent stars, Thomas Whitmore would cross a line of no return. And for the first time in his life, he felt he was truly following in the footsteps of Christ, the narrow path that led to righteousness, no matter the cost. Mama Ruth's cabin smelled of medicinal herbs and tallow candles. Thomas entered, his heart racing, knowing that each step took him further from the world he knew and closer to something dangerous and real. Inside, 6 people awaited him. Abeni was in the center, his eyes shining in the light of the single candle. Mama Ruth, Samuel, Isaiah, Moses, and a woman Thomas didn't know. Delilah, who worked in the kitchen of the big house and listened to everything the white people said when they thought slaves were invisible. He's here, Abeni announced, his voice neutral. Now we need to decide if we trust him with our lives. Samuel stepped forward, imposingly. Speak, Thomas Whitmore. Why should we believe you won't run to your father and denounce us? Why would a slave owner betray his own blood? Thomas took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. My mother, Catherine Whitmore, died when I was 12. Before she passed, she made me swear on her Bible that I would never forget that every human being, regardless of skin color, was created in God's image. She hated slavery, although she couldn't speak openly against it. Nice words, Isaiah grumbled, but words don't free us from chains. You're right. That's why I'm here, to turn words into actions. Thomas looked directly at Abeni. What are you planning? It was Mama Ruth who answered, her voice low but firm. A railroad. Not of iron and steam, but of courage and faith. The Underground Railroad passes only 20 miles from here. There is a safe station where fugitives can rest before heading north to freedom. Thomas knew of the rumors about the Underground Railroad, the secret network that helped runaway slaves reach free states and even Canada. but he never imagined it operated so close to home. "How many of you are planning to escape?" 14, Delilah replied, "including 5 children, but the road is dangerous. Bounty hunters patrol the area. Your father increased surveillance after 3 slaves from the Henderson plantation escaped last month. We need someone who knows the patrols," Moses explained, "someone who can tell us when the paths are clear. And we need supplies, food, blankets, medicine." Thomas felt the weight of what was being asked. "If I do this, I will be committing a crime against the laws of the South, against my own father." "Yes," Abeni said simply, "and we'll be risking something far worse than prison. But you spoke of doing the right thing. These are your words being tested." Thomas looked at each face in that circle. He saw fear, hope, determination. He saw people willing to risk everything for something he had always had and never valued: freedom. "How can I help?" The relief was palpable. Mama Ruth hugged him, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "God bless your courageous soul, son." In the following hours, they planned meticulously. Thomas would provide information about patrol routes, divert attention when necessary, and steal supplies from the pantry of the main house. The escape would take place in 3 weeks during the new moon, when the darkness would protect them. But there was a problem. "Abeni is not coming with us," Samuel announced suddenly. Thomas turned to her, confused. "Why? You're the one taking the biggest risk here. My father has you marked." "Exactly," Abeni replied, his voice firm. "If I disappear, your father will mobilize every bounty hunter in Georgia. But if I stay, I'll be the distraction. He'll be so focused on breaking me that he won't notice the others disappearing one by one." "That's suicide," Thomas protested, surprised by the intensity of his own reaction. "That's sacrifice," Abeni corrected. "My people have a word: Ubuntu. It means I am because we are. My freedom means nothing if it comes at the expense of these children. I'm staying." Thomas felt something break inside him. The nobility of that woman, the strength of her character, was something he had never encountered among his own class. Here was someone truly worthy of respect, someone who lived the principles he only professed. "Then I'll stay too," he said impulsively. "To protect you, to make sure you don't suffer alone because of the choices we're making together." Abeni stared at him for a long moment. Something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that transcended the impossible barriers of race and circumstance. For the first time, Thomas saw his defenses lower slightly, saw the woman behind the warrior. "You're foolish," she said softly. "But perhaps it's the kind of foolishness this world needs." For the next 2 weeks, Thomas lived a double life. During the day, he returned to the main house after completing his punishment, pretending to have learned his lesson. He dined with his father, discussed farm business, and acted like the obedient son. But his nights belonged to rebellion. He stole small amounts of food, never enough to be noticed immediately. He copied the patrol routes from his father's office, and whenever he could, he met with Abeni. These meetings began as practical matters, discussions about logistics and planning. But slowly, they transformed into something more. They talked about faith and philosophy, about justice and freedom. Abeni told him about her homeland, about the customs of her people, about the God she worshipped under other names. But who, Thomas was beginning to realize, was the same God of love and justice. "Have you ever loved someone?" Abeni asked one night as they watched the stars through a crack in the roof of the cabin. "I thought so once. Elizabeth Harrington, the judge's daughter. Our parents arranged an engagement, but it was all empty. Conversations about weather and fashion, nothing of substance, nothing real." He hesitated. "And you?" "I was betrothed to a warrior named Kofi. He died defending our village when the traffickers came. I loved him, but it was a youthful love, untested by fire." She turned to him. "Now I know a truth. True love is not that which lives in ease, but that which chooses to stay when everything tells you to run away. Their eyes met, and Thomas felt the world stop. He knew it was impossible, forbidden, dangerous, but he also knew with absolute certainty that he was falling in love with Abeni. "What we're doing," he said carefully, "goes beyond just helping fugitives, doesn't it?" "Yes," she whispered, "it goes beyond anything that should be possible between us." They didn't kiss that night. They both knew that crossing that line would make everything even more dangerous. But they made a silent promise, sealed in their exchanged glances. When the approaching storm passed, when justice prevailed, they would find a way to be together. But fate had other plans. The next morning, Delilah came running, terror etched on her face. "Bounty hunters arrived last night, and they brought dogs trained for tracking. Your father hired the worst of them, Caleb Thorne, the man who never lost a fugitive." The escape had to happen immediately. And Thomas Whitmore would have to make a choice that would define who he really was. Caleb Thorne was a legend on the southern plantations, and a nightmare for any slave who dreamed of freedom. Tall, thin as death, with cold eyes that never blinked, and a scar that cut across his face from his left eye to his chin. They said he had sold his own soul to the devil in exchange for the ability to sniff out fugitives like his dog sniffed out blood. Thomas first saw him during breakfast, sitting at the table in the big house with his father, discussing hunting strategies while munching on bacon and eggs as if planning a simple hunting trip. "The Negroes have been restless all over the South, Colonel Whitmore," Thorne said, his voice a nasty hiss. "The Underground Railroad is growing, getting bolder, but I have my sources. I know there's a station 20 miles from here, near Blackwater Swamp. And I know your Negroes are planning something." Thomas almost dropped his cup of coffee. How could Thorne have known? "Evidence?" his father asked, narrowing his eyes. "Small things. Food slowly disappearing, slaves whispering and stopping when overseers approach. And then there's your new acquisition, Abeni. She's the type who infects others with dangerous ideas." Edmund Whitmore slammed his fist on the table. "I knew I should have broken her on the first day, but don't worry, Thorne. I have plans for her. Tonight, in front of everyone, she'll receive a lesson no one will forget." Thomas felt his blood run cold. "Dad, surely—" "Silence," Edmund cut him off. "You've shown too much weakness. It's time to learn how to truly maintain order. And you will watch. No more than that, you will participate." As soon as he could, Thomas ran to the slave quarters, his heart pounding. He found Mama Ruth first. "We need to act today, now. My father is planning to make an example of Abeni, and Thorne suspects the escape." Mother Ruth closed her eyes, praying quickly. "The Lord knows our ways. Samuel and Moses have already taken the first group, 6 people, including the children. They left before dawn, but there are still 8 here, waiting for the new moon. We can't wait. Thorne has dogs. If we wait, they'll all be captured. And if we flee now in broad daylight, we'll be seen." Abeni emerged from the shadows, his voice calm, despite the gravity of the situation. "It's a trap with no way out." Thomas looked at her, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw fear in her eyes. Not fear for herself, but for others. "There is a way," he said suddenly, a desperate plan forming in his mind. "But it requires me to do something unforgivable, something that cannot be undone." "Say it," Abeni ordered. "Tonight, when my father gathers everyone for punishment, there will be a distraction, chaos. And during that chaos, the remaining 8 escape. Use the tunnel under the barn, the one my grandfather built during the War of 1812. You have a 3-hour head start before anyone notices." "What kind of distraction?" Isaiah asked suspiciously. Thomas took a deep breath. "The kind that will destroy my life but save yours. Trust me. But we need a guide. Someone who knows the way to the Underground Railroad station." "I will go," Abeni said immediately. "No," Thomas protested. "If you go, my father—" Your father wants me as an example. He'll use me as a scapegoat. But if I'm not there, his distraction won't work. He'll simply choose someone else to punish. She touched his face with surprising tenderness. I need to be there. But then, when the chaos begins, I'll run. And Thomas, you're coming with me. I can't let you do this alone. And don't leave me. Come with me. Leave this place of death and choose life. The look they exchanged contained worlds. It was a request and a promise. It was madness and the only sane thing in an insane world. Okay, Thomas agreed. Together. The hours until nightfall passed in feverish preparation. The 8 who would escape were briefed. Supplies were hidden. Routes were memorized. And Thomas wrote a letter he would leave in his mother's Bible, explaining his actions, asking for forgiveness, but not apologizing. As the sun began to set, all the enslaved people were summoned to the central courtyard. Torches were lit. The whipping post was prepared. Edmund Whitmore stood in his finest attire, ready to preside over his own twisted version of justice. Abeni was brought here, her hands bound. But she walked with her head held high, each step an act of silent defiance. Slaves of the Whitmore plantation, Edmund proclaimed. We are here tonight because there are those among you who have forgotten their place, who have become filled with ideas beyond their station. This woman, Abeni, is the worst of them. She will be punished, and you will all watch so that you remember. Disobedience will not be tolerated. He turned to Thomas. My son will administer the punishment. 50 lashes. Begin. It was the moment when everything would change. Thomas picked up the whip, heavy in his hands. He walked slowly towards Abeni. Their eyes met, and in them he saw everything he needed: courage, love, and faith that he would do the right thing. I'm so sorry, he whispered, too low for others to hear, for everything my people did to your people. So, instead of whipping Abeni, Thomas turned around and, with all the strength he possessed, hurled the whip directly into his father's face. Time stood still. Edmund Whitmore screamed, clutching his bleeding face where the whip's tip had struck him. Caleb Thorne drew his weapon. The overseers advanced, and Thomas shouted the words he had rehearsed, "Run! Run now!" Chaos erupted. Thomas cut Abeni's ropes with the knife he had hidden. Mama Ruth began to sing, a signal that sent the 8 fugitives running for the barn. Some enslaved people blocked the overseers, feigning confusion. Others knocked over torches, creating small fires that demanded immediate attention. "Traitor!" Edmund roared, blood dripping between his fingers. "Kill him! Kill them both!" A shot rang out. Thomas felt something burn his shoulder. Thorne had shot him, but the pain didn't matter. He grabbed Abeni's hand and they ran. They ran through the chaos, through the smoke, through shouts and confusion. They ran to the line of trees where 2 horses, the best on the farm which Thomas had trained, awaited them. Behind them, Thorne's dogs began to bark. The hunt had begun. Mounted, they galloped through the darkness. Thomas had known these lands since childhood, every trail, every shortcut. But Thorne was also experienced, and he wouldn't give up easily. "Where to?" Abeni shouted over the wind. "To the station, to freedom. And Abeni." He looked at her, even in the darkness, seeing the determination in her face. "I love you. I know it's madness. I know the world will condemn us. But I love you." Tears glistened in her eyes. "And I love you, Thomas Whitmore. You who sacrificed everything. You who chose justice over comfort. You who showed me that love can break even the strongest chains." They rode through the night, 2 fugitives now, 2 souls searching for something this world said was impossible. Love and freedom, intertwined as one. But the story was far from over. And the secrets that were yet to be revealed would change everything once again. The forest swallowed them like a dark, damp womb. Branches whipped their faces, roots threatened to topple their horses, but Thomas and Abeni dared not slow their pace. Behind them, The barking of Thorne's dogs echoed like omens of doom. Thomas's shoulder throbbed where the bullet had torn the flesh, blood soaking his shirt. Abeni noticed when he swayed in the saddle. "You're hurt!" "It's superficial. Keep riding." But it wasn't superficial, and they both knew it. With each gallop, Thomas felt his strength draining away along with the blood. If they didn't treat the wound soon, he wouldn't survive the night. 40 minutes later, they reached the creek, exactly where Thomas had planned. "Here, we need to follow the water. The dogs will lose our trail." They dismounted, leading the horses through the shallow current. The icy water momentarily invigorated Thomas, but he knew it was temporary. They needed to reach the underground railroad station, and quickly. "Thomas, you need to stop. You need to let me treat this wound." "We don't have time." "Thorne, you'll get nowhere if you die." Abeni interrupted him, his voice breaking. "Please." He looked at her and saw not just concern, but something deeper, a genuine fear of losing him. And in that moment, he realized she wasn't just running away with him. She was choosing to live with him, or not to live at all. They found a cavity in the rocks on the banks of the stream. Abeni tore her own skirt to make bandages, using herbs she had gathered even in the darkness, knowledge from her homeland, saving one man's life from another. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Worse than a heart broken by slavery, worse than a soul crushed by injustice." He tried to smile, do what must be done. While Abeni cleaned and bandaged the wound, Thomas studied her face in the dim moonlight. How had he lived without knowing her? How had he thought his previous existence had any meaning? "My mother had a prophecy," he said suddenly, the pain making his words more honest. "Before she died, she said I would have to choose between comfort and conscience, between my father's inheritance and God's inheritance. She said that when the time came, I would know what to do. And did you know? The moment I saw you tied to that tree trunk, something inside me woke up. It was as if my whole life had been asleep, and you were the cry that awakened me." He held her hand. "Abeni, if we die tonight, we will not die. But if we die, I want you to know it was worth it. Every moment, every choice that brought me to you." She kissed him then, fiercely and gently at the same time. A kiss that contained all the suffering of her people and all the hope of her heart. A kiss that was both farewell and oath. When they parted ways, both had tears in their eyes. "Now let's go," Abeni said, his voice firm again. "Let's survive this night, and all the nights to come." They continued along the water until they reached the fork that Thomas knew, where the stream split in 3 directions. It was a turning point, a place where even the best trackers would be confused about which way to go. But when they arrived there, they found something unexpected. Moses and Isaiah waiting on the shore. "Praise be to God," Moses exclaimed. "We thought you couldn't do it." "The others?" Thomas asked urgently. "Safe. They're already on their way to the station, guided by Samuel. But we came back because—" Isaiah hesitated. "Because Mother Ruth told us to come back. She said you would need us. She said there was still a battle to win." "Mother Ruth," Abeni whispered, emotion in her voice. Even in her escape, the old woman had thought of them. And she was right. A new voice cut through the night. Everyone turned around. Emerging from the trees was not Caleb Thorne as they had expected, but someone far more unexpected. Silas Crow, the foreman. But unlike his usual cruelty, there was something different in his eyes. Something like regret. "Don't shoot," he said quickly, hands raised. "I didn't come here to capture you." "Liar," Isaiah hissed, stepping forward. "You who whipped my brother to death." "I know," Silas said, and for the first time he seemed truly human. "And I carry this sin every day. But tonight I saw something that broke me. I saw a white man choose justice over his own father. I saw love where there should only have been hate, and I realized I've been living on the wrong side of history. Thomas studied him, trying to discern truth from falsehood. "What do you want?" "Redeem myself, if possible, or at least not increase my sentence." Silas pulled something from his coat, a map. "Thorn is planning a trap. He knows about the underground railroad station. He sent messengers to mobilize all the hunters in the region. When you get there, it will be a massacre." Thomas's blood ran cold. The others, Samuel and the 6, they still have time. But only if someone gets there first to warn them. And there's something else. Silas hesitated. "Your father, Thomas, he's coming. And he's not just coming to recapture you. He's coming to kill, especially you. He said he'd rather have a dead son than a living traitor." The words hit Thomas like physical blows. He had always known his father was tough, but this was beyond any expectation. "Why help us now?" Abeni asked, still suspicious. "Because," Silas closed his eyes, "because I have a daughter. A mixed-race daughter I've kept hidden all these years, born to a woman I loved but couldn't publicly acknowledge because of the laws of this cursed land. And today I realized, if men like Thomas can change, perhaps there's hope that one day my daughter will live in a world where she doesn't have to hide." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. There was living proof that the system of slavery destroyed not only black people, but the humanity of everyone. "There's an alternate route," Silas continued, pointing on the map. "Longer, more dangerous, it goes through Blackwater Swamp. But Thorn doesn't expect you to take it. You can reach the station from the rear, warn the others, and everyone can escape before the trap is triggered." "And you?" Thomas asked. "What will happen to you when Thorn finds out?" "I will probably be hanged as an accomplice to fugitives, but my sin is too great to be washed away with anything less than blood." "Let it be my blood then, not yours." Moses approached Silas, studying him intently. Then, to everyone's surprise, he extended his hand. "The Lord judges hearts. If your repentance is genuine, who are we to refuse forgiveness when we plead for it?" Silas shook the offered hand, tears streaming down his face, marked by time and cruelty. "Go," he said. "Go quickly, and Thomas." He looked at the young man he had known since he was a baby. "Your mother would be proud. Catherine Whitmore was the kindest woman I ever knew. She knew. She always knew you would choose the right path when the time came." With Silas's map, the 4, Thomas, Abeni, Moses, and Isaiah, ran to the swamps. The water reached their knees, invisible creatures moved in the shadows, and the air smelled of decay and life in equal measure. But as they moved forward, Thomas felt something strange. Peace. For the first time in his life, he was doing exactly what he was born to do. And beside him, holding his hand through the darkness and the swamp, was the woman who had proven that love was stronger than chains, more powerful than prejudice, more enduring than hatred. "Almost there," Moses whispered, pointing to a faint light in the distance, the safe station. But then a gunshot tore through the night. Edmund Whitmore emerged from the trees, followed by Caleb Thorne and a dozen armed men. "Did you think I'd be so easy to fool?" Edmund laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. "Silas Crow was always weak. I knew he'd help them. Why else would I have let him escape the farm?" It was a trap within a trap. And now, in the heart of the swamp, surrounded and outnumbered, Thomas and Abeni would face their final test. Edmund Whitmore was unrecognizable. The dried blood from the wound on his face had transformed him into something savage, an embodiment of the fury that slavery cultivated in human hearts until nothing human remained. "My own son," he spat the words like poison. "My own blood, conspiring with beasts of burden." Catherine poisoned his mind with those abolitionist ideas, but I thought I had corrected that. I was wrong. Thomas stepped forward, placing himself between his father and Abeni. "It wasn't my mother who taught me this, Father. It was Christ. It was reading the same scriptures you quote on Sundays and realizing that we practice the opposite of everything they teach." Don't quote the Bible to me, kid. The Bible itself says, "Servants, obey your masters." And it also says, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, but you are all one in Christ Jesus." Thomas retorted, "You chose the verses that serve your greed and ignored those that condemn your cruelty." And Caleb Thorne stepped forward, his gun pointed. "I've heard enough. Colonel, let me finish this. One shot for each of them, and we dump the bodies in the swamp. No one will ever know." "No!" Edmund raised his hand. "Not to him. Thomas will return with me, be publicly judged, hanged as a traitor. I want the whole South to see the price of treason." "And her?" Thorne pointed the gun at Abeni. Edmund looked at Abeni with pure hatred. She will be burned alive. A message to any slave who dreams of freedom." Moses and Isaiah moved to defend, but they were unarmed. Edmund's men surrounded them. There seemed to be no way out. But then, Abeni did something extraordinary. She stepped forward, head held high, and began to sing. It was a hymn, not in English, but in the language of his people. His voice cut through the night like light through darkness. And though Edmund didn't understand the words, he felt their power. It was a song of freedom, of faith, of undying hope. "Silence!" he shouted, but Abeni continued singing. Then something miraculous happened. From behind Edmund's men, other voices joined the chanting. Samuel emerged from the trees, bringing with him not only the 6 fugitives, but dozens of others, slaves from neighboring farms, free black people from nearby towns, and even some white abolitionists. "They didn't come here to fight," Samuel announced. "They came here to bear witness, to plant their lives amidst injustice and its victims." The Underground Railroad station wasn't just a safe haven. It was the heart of a movement. And that night, that movement revealed itself in all its force. Among the crowd, Thomas saw familiar faces, dock workers, shop owners who secretly sympathized with the abolitionist cause, even a reverend from Charleston who risked everything for his principles. "Shoot us if you want," the reverend said, his voice firm. "But shoot knowing that every shot will be witnessed, every death documented, every crime against humanity recorded, so that history may judge you." Edmund looked around, realizing for the first time that he was outnumbered, not in numbers, but in conviction. His men hesitated, realizing that crossing that line would transform them not into defenders of order, but into murderers before witnesses. "This is treason!" Edmund thundered, but his voice had lost its power. "You will all be prosecuted." "Then let us be," Thomas said, stepping forward. "Father, you can hang me, you can kill me, but you cannot erase the truth. These people are not property. They are children of God, equal to you and me. And one day this nation will awaken to this truth. One day slavery will fall, and men like you will be remembered with shame." "And men like you?" Edmund scoffed. "How will they be remembered?" "I hope they will be remembered as those who tried, even imperfectly, to do what was right. As those who chose love over profit, justice over tradition." For a long moment, father and son stared at each other. And Thomas saw something break in his father's eyes, not regret, but the realization that he had lost not only his son, but any claim to moral righteousness. "Take them," Edmund finally said to Thorne, his voice defeated. "It's not worth it. Let them flee north and freeze in misery. This land will not accept them back." But Caleb Thorne didn't lower his weapon. "No, Colonel. I was hired for a job, and I always complete my jobs. This black woman has a bounty on her head, and I always collect." He set his sights on Abeni. Time slowed down. Thomas saw Thorne's finger pull the trigger. He saw Abeni, beautiful and defiant to the end. And without thinking, without hesitating, he threw himself in front of her. The shot exploded. Thomas felt the impact like a hammer blow to his chest. The world spun. He heard Abeni scream, felt his hands holding him as he fell. Chaos erupted. The crowd surged forward. Edmund's men fled, realizing they had crossed a terrible line. Thorne tried to reload, but was overpowered by Samuel and Isaiah. And Edmund Whitmore stood there, gazing at his bleeding son in the arms of a woman he had considered less than human, and saw, perhaps for the first time, the true cost of his sins. "Thomas, Thomas, no!" Abeni cried, pressing her hands against the wound in her chest. "You can't leave me, not after everything!" Thomas touched her face, leaving a bloody mark on her cheek. "It was worth it," he whispered. "Every moment with you was worth it." "No!" Mama Ruth knelt beside them, her skillful hands examining the wound. "Don't talk like that, son. You didn't come all this way just to die now." But Thomas could feel his life slipping away. And strangely, he felt no fear. He felt peace. He had done what he was born to do. He had truly loved. He had chosen justice. "Abeni," he whispered, "promise me. Live free. Tell our story so that others may know that love is stronger than hate." "I promise," she sobbed, "but not without you. We will live together. It has to be that way." The stars shone above, indifferent to the human drama below. And as Thomas felt the darkness approaching, he heard a voice. Not Abeni's, not Mama Ruth's, but his mother Catherine's, whispering through the years. "Well done, my son. Well done, good and faithful servant." So, a miracle. The Reverend from Charleston knelt down, his medical bag in hand. "I was an army surgeon before I became a preacher. Step aside. There is still hope." For 3 hours, as night gave way to dawn, the Reverend fought for Thomas's life. Mama Ruth provided herbs. Abeni held his hand, praying in 2 languages, and the entire community kept vigil. And when the sun rose over Blackwater Swamp, Thomas Whitmore opened his eyes. "You're back," Abeni whispered, tears of joy streaming down his face. "You're back for me." The recovery took weeks. During that time, remarkable things happened. Edmund Whitmore, confronted with the near-death experience of his only son, underwent a transformation. It wasn't instantaneous or complete. A lifetime of hatred doesn't disappear overnight, but something within him broke. He freed his slaves. Not all at once. He feared what the other farmers would do, but gradually using legal excuses, selling them to agents of the Underground Railroad for symbolic prices, finding ways to give them freedom. Silas Crow, who survived the night in the swamp, became a conductor for the Underground Railroad, using his knowledge of hunter tactics to protect fugitives. And Thomas and Abben? They married in a secret ceremony, officiated by a reverend from Charleston, witnessed by those who had become their true family. They knew their marriage wasn't legal under Southern law, but it was sacred in the eyes of God. And that was enough. They moved north to Boston, where they joined the abolitionist movement. Thomas wrote a book telling his story, From Comfort to Christ, A Southern Son Finds Freedom, which became a bestseller and a powerful tool in the fight against slavery. Abeni opened a school for free black children, teaching them not only to read and write, but also about their African roots, dignity, and resistance. Together, they had 3 children. And to each one, they told the story of how true love knows no chains, recognizes no colors, and only sees souls created in the image of God. Years later, when the Civil War finally arrived and slavery was abolished, Thomas and Abeni were there on the day the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Mama Ruth, now 90 years old, wept tears of joy, knowing she had lived to see the Jubilee. And Edmund Whitmore, on his deathbed, asked to see his son one last time. "I was wrong," he whispered, his voice weak, "about everything. You were more of a man than I ever was. You chose humanity over gold. Can you forgive me?" Thomas held his father's hand. The same hand that had struck him, that had ordered untold suffering, and said, "Yes, Father, just as Christ forgives us, I forgive you. May your soul find the peace you denied to so many." Edmund Whitmore died with tears in his eyes, holding the hand of the son he had tried to destroy, but who, in the end, had saved his soul. The story of Thomas and Abini spread, inspiring other interracial couples to challenge unjust laws, inspiring Christians to question how their churches had justified slavery, inspiring a nation to confront its sins. It wasn't a fairy tale. They faced discrimination, dangers, even death threats. But together, with faith as their anchor and love as their sail, they navigated every storm. And when, old and grey, they sat on their Boston porch watching their grandchildren play, children of mixed blood living freely in a transformed America, they knew that every sacrifice had been worth it. "Do you regret it?" Abeni asked once, touching the scar on his chest where Thorn's bullet had nearly killed him. Thomas looked at her, her hair grey, but her eyes still burning with that indomitable spirit, and smiled. "Not a single moment. You were God's calling in my life. You were my liberation as much as I hope, was a part of yours. And together we witnessed that God's love knows no boundaries created by men." They kissed then, as they had done 1,000 times before, a kiss that proved that true love not only survives, it conquers, transforms, redeems. And her story continued to live on, passed down from generation to generation, an eternal testament that when faith meets courage, when love confronts injustice, miracles happen. Even in the darkest places, even in the cruelest times, there are always those who choose the light. And when two courageous hearts meet in that light, neither chains nor laws nor all the hatred in the world can destroy what God has joined together. This was the story of Thomas and Abini, a story of faith tested in fire, love born in suffering, and redemption won through sacrifice. May their lives inspire us to also choose justice over comfort, love over tradition, and humanity above all else. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the transformative power of love and faith, subscribe to our channel. Share this story so that more people can learn about these courageous testimonies that changed history. Leave a comment telling us how this story impacted you. And remember, you too can be an instrument of justice and love in today's world. The story isn't over. We write it with every choice we make. God bless you. Until the next story.